Have you ever felt it? That almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, a subtle disquiet that settles in the room, a strange, unnameable chill that seems to run down your spine when you find yourself in the presence of a certain person. It's a peculiar sensation, isn't it? A feeling that often defies logical explanation, even when on the surface everything appears perfectly normal, even strikingly admirable. Their words might be like smooth, polished stones, carefully chosen and elegantly delivered. Their smile might be perfectly calibrated to charm, to disarm. Their actions, when scrutinized individually, might seem imbued with kindness, with consideration, with an almost saintly patience. Yet beneath that meticulously constructed veneer, there's a nagging feeling, an unspoken dissonance, a quiet, insistent inner voice, your own internal sentinel, whispering that something is profoundly, unsettlingly off. You can't quite put your finger on it, can you? You try to rationalize it away, to dismiss it as your own oversensitivity, your own paranoia, perhaps even your own flawed judgment. But it lingers, doesn't it? A silent, persistent alarm ringing in the deepest, most ancient chambers of your intuition. It's a feeling that demands attention, a whisper from your unconscious that hints at unseen currents, at hidden landscapes beneath the surface of polite society. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, the intrepid explorer who dared to map the vast, often treacherous and largely uncharted landscapes of the human psyche, didn't just speak of archetypes, of collective dreams, of ancient universal symbols. No, his life's work, his profound legacy delved into the very fabric of our human interactions, into the intricate dance of conscious and unconscious, into the shadows that we all carry, often unknowingly, and into the unconscious currents that shape our lives, our relationships, our destinies, in ways we seldom recognize until perhaps it's too late. He warned us with a depth of insight that still resonates today, not just about the overt monsters of myth and legend, the dragons and demons that populate our nightmares, but about the dangers that wear a more deceptive, a more socially acceptable, and therefore perhaps even more insidious and damaging guise. He taught us that the greatest threats to our psychological well-being, to our very soul, often come not from a place of conscious, calculated malice, but from a place of profound, almost childlike unconsciousness. Today, we're not talking about the villains you see in movies, the ones with obvious theatrical malice etched into their features, the ones whose evil is broadcast for all to see, making them easy to identify and avoid. We're going deeper, much, much deeper. We're venturing into that subtle, often invisible, yet profoundly powerful territory of the unconscious, that hidden realm where the most complex, the most unintegrated, the most denied parts of a personality reside and fester, often for a lifetime. It is here in this shadowed landscape of the soul that we can find what Jung, with his unparalleled understanding of psychic dynamics, might consider the most dangerous sign in a person. A sign so insidious, so cleverly masked by social graces, by performative virtue, or even by an aura of victimhood, that if you fail to recognize it, if you dismiss that quiet inner warning as mere fancy, as your own unfounded suspicion, you risk being drawn step by unsuspecting step into a vortex of emotional turmoil, into relationships that don't just disappoint or frustrate, but actively, systematically diminish you, that slowly, painfully erode your very sense of self, your confidence, your sanity, your precious, irreplaceable light. So what is this sign? What is this subtle yet profoundly dangerous characteristic that Carl Jung's profound body of work, his lifetime of clinical observation and deep introspection, illuminates for us with such startling, often uncomfortable clarity? Is it their temper, their sudden, unpredictable propensity for anger? Is it their capacity for deceit, their silver-tongued lies that can twist reality into unrecognizable shapes? Those are troubling, yes, undeniably. They are red flags that should never be ignored. But Jung, in his wisdom, pointed to something even more fundamental, something at the very root of their being, something that often underpins and fuels many other destructive behaviors. It's not merely the explosive rage that shatters the peace of a room, though that is undeniably destructive and terrifying. It's not even calculated conscious deception, though that too is a clear and present warning of untrustworthiness. The most dangerous sign, when viewed through the profound, unflinching, and deeply compassionate lens of Jungian psychology, is often far more subtle, far more deeply embedded within the core structure of the psyche. It stems from a profound, almost absolute disconnection from their own inner world, a terrifying, often unacknowledged alienation from their own soul. More specifically, and this is the crux of our exploration today, it is the utter, unyielding, and entirely unconscious denial and subsequent relentless and often devastating projection of their own shadow. That sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? A complex psychological term that might seem abstract, academic, but stay with me, please, because understanding this concept, truly grasping its implications, its manifestations in everyday life, is crucial. It could be the key, not just to understanding the perplexing and often painful behavior of others, but to preserving your own psychological well-being, your own inner peace, your own journey towards wholeness. Every single one of us, you, me, every human being walking this earth possesses what Carl Jung so aptly termed the shadow. Now, this isn't some demonic entity lurking in the dark corners of our minds, waiting to pounce. Not inherently. The shadow is, simply put, the disowned self. It's the vast, often unexplored and frequently feared repository of all the parts of our personality that we, for whatever reason, be it societal conditioning, early childhood experiences, traumatic events, or simply personal preference, have deemed unacceptable, unworthy, inferior, or bad. It holds our repressed desires, the primal instincts we've been taught to tame, or deny, the weaknesses we desperately try to conceal from ourselves and from the world. The aspects of ourselves we consider ugly, shameful, or that society has taught us to be ashamed of. It's where our hidden fears reside, our unhealed traumas fester, our unspoken resentments simmer, and even paradoxically, where some of our brightest unlived potentials have soured into bitterness or cynicism because they were never given expression. A person on the path to psychological health, on the arduous but ultimately rewarding journey towards what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming a whole, integrated, and authentic self, will gradually, often painfully and with great courage, become aware of this shadow. They will learn to confront it, not to conquer it or annihilate it, for that is impossible and undesirable, but to understand it, to dialogue with it, to acknowledge its presence and its power, and most importantly, to integrate its energies, its lessons, its raw, untamed power into their conscious personality. They learn to accept their own imperfections, their own capacity for darkness as well as light, their full, complex, and often contradictory humanity. This is the work of a lifetime. But the individual Jung would identify as truly, deeply dangerous, the one who carries that most dangerous sign, is the one who utterly, vehemently, and with an almost religious fervor, denies the very existence of their inner shadow. They construct an image of themselves, a persona, that social mask we all wear to navigate the complexities of the world, that is not just polished, not just presentable, but impossibly unnaturally perfect. In their own eyes, and often distressingly in the eyes of the unsuspecting, easily charmed world, they are always good, always right, incapable of error, devoid of any negative thoughts, any base desires, any unacceptable impulses. They are the saints walking among us, the martyrs bearing their crosses with noble fortitude, the paragons of virtue whose light seems to shine so brightly. And the most critical, most alarming part of this entire dynamic, they believe this idealized, airbrushed self-image with an unshakable, often fanatical conviction. They have become so identified with the mask, so fused with this artificial construct, that they have forgotten or perhaps never truly known the complex, multifaceted, authentically human and beautifully flawed face beneath. The mask has become the reality, and the true suffering and often lonely self is lost in the very darkness it was meant to conceal and deny. This absolute denial is not strength. It is a profound and dangerous fragility. The insidious danger of this pervasive shadow denial lies in its far-reaching and inevitably destructive consequences, both for the individual themselves and for everyone who comes into their orbit. If you cannot see your own darkness, if you steadfastly refuse to acknowledge your own capacity for negativity, for selfishness, for envy, for rage, for pettiness, how can you possibly understand the true, often hidden motivations behind your actions, your words, your very thoughts and feelings? You can't. Such individuals operate in a state of profound self-ignorance, a kind of psychological blindness that prevents them from seeing themselves as they truly are. They are driven by unconscious forces, by the denied and therefore untamed energies of their shadow forces they neither recognize nor control. They can inflict immense pain on others, not necessarily out of conscious malice or a deliberate, calculated desire to harm, but simply because they are blind to the shadow elements, the disowned, festering parts of themselves that are actually pulling the strings dictating their behavior, their reactions, their judgments, because they are in their own carefully constructed internal narrative. Flawless, then any problem, any conflict, any pain that arises in their lives or in their relationships can never be their fault. Never. It is an impossibility within their psychological framework. They will always, and I mean always, find an external cause, an external culprit, a convenient scapegoat. They will blame you. They will blame your inadequacies, your sensitivities, your provocations. They will blame circumstances, bad luck, the system. They will blame the world, society for being unfair, for not understanding them. They are masters of deflection, experts at externalizing blame, at finding someone or something else to carry the heavy burden of their unacknowledged failings, their unowned darkness, their unbearable imperfections. And this leads directly to one of the most painful paradoxes, one of the most telling and consistent signs of this dangerous dynamic. Those who most ferociously, most self-righteously deny their own shadow often become the most harshly, relentlessly, and unforgivingly judgmental of others. They project with an almost uncanny radar-like accuracy their own disowned traits, their own repressed impulses onto those around them. The very flaws, the very desires, the very sins they cannot bear to see, to even imagine existing in themselves, they will spot with laser-like precision in others, often exaggerating them, distorting them, and then they will condemn them with a venomous, self-righteous fury, a moral indignation that often seems wildly, shockingly disproportionate to the alleged offense. How could they be so envious, so petty, so consumed by negativity? They might exclaim with genuine disdain, all the while their own unacknowledged envy, their own repressed pettiness, their own disowned negativity seethes like a toxic, corrosive brew beneath the surface of their carefully constructed virtuous persona. Why is that person so manipulative, so deceitful, so untrustworthy? They'll decry with a performance of moral outrage, utterly blind, deaf, and dumb to their own subtle, often unconscious machinations, their own sophisticated ways of controlling situations, of distorting reality, of managing impressions to fit their needs and maintain their flawless self-image. This, my friends, this externalization of inner darkness, this unconscious accusation of others for one's own unowned faults, is the insidious mechanism of projection in full destructive and often heartbreaking swing. This is where the danger becomes truly personal, deeply intimate, and profoundly damaging for those who unfortunately find themselves in the close orbit of such an individual. When a person cannot contain, cannot integrate cannot even begin to acknowledge their own shadow. That powerful primal psychic energy doesn't just dissipate harmlessly into thin air. No, it has to go somewhere. It must find an outlet, a target, and it gets projected outwards like an invisible, often highly charged spotlight of negativity onto others. And who becomes the unwitting recipient, the convenient screen for these disowned, often dangerous and highly volatile parts of their psyche? Frequently, it's you. It's the people closest to them, the ones with whom they share their lives, their hopes, their dreams, their vulnerabilities, their partners, their children, their closest friends, even their colleagues in a work environment. You, without ever realizing it, without ever consenting to it, can become the living, breathing embodiment of everything they hate, everything they fear, everything they cannot and will not confront within themselves. And because this entire process is largely, if not entirely, unconscious on their part, they genuinely believe they are seeing these flaws in you. It's incredibly difficult, often impossible, to address directly, to reason with, or to resolve through normal, rational communication. Trying to explain yourself to defend your character is like arguing with a distorted mirror that only reflects back their own disowned face. You might find yourself inexplicably cast as the villain in their inner drama, a drama you never auditioned for, a script you never agreed to read. If they are suppressing a mountain of unexpressed, unacknowledged rage, a lifetime of swallowed injustices, they might perceive you as constantly aggressive, as always looking for a fight, as perpetually irritable and provocative, even when you are consciously trying your utmost to be peaceful, understanding, and accommodating. If they are denying their own deep-seated insecurities, their own pervasive feelings of inadequacy, their own terror of not being good enough, they might consistently accuse you of trying to undermine them, of being overly critical, of intentionally making them feel small, incompetent, or foolish. Does this sound painfully familiar? Do these insidious patterns resonate with experiences you've had in your own life, with relationships that left you feeling perpetually confused, constantly on edge, emotionally drained, and fundamentally doubting your own perceptions, your own sanity? Your relationships with such individuals inevitably become distorted, unsafe, and ultimately profoundly toxic. You are no longer seen, no longer related to as the unique, complex, multifaceted, individual human being you are with your own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. No. Instead, you become a symbol, a convenient repository for their disowned psychic material, a blank canvas upon which they unconsciously, compulsively paint their darkest fears, their most troubling impulses, their unresolved traumas. Every interaction, every conversation, every shared moment, no matter how seemingly trivial, becomes colored, tainted by these pervasive, unconscious projections. You might find yourself constantly walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around their myriad, ever-shifting sensitivities, never knowing what innocent word, what well-intentioned action, what simple expression of your own selfhood might trigger a disproportionate, bewildering, and often deeply hurtful reaction. Unconscious emotional manipulation in its most subtle, insidious, and damaging forms becomes the unspoken norm of the relationship. They can, without ever consciously intending to, without ever plotting it out, make you feel a crushing, unbearable weight of guilt for things you haven't done, a pervasive, soul-eating sense of shame for who you inherently are, or a gnawing, disorienting, sanity-eroding doubt in your own perception of reality, simply because you inadvertently, unknowingly trigger their repressed, volatile, and highly reactive shadow. They genuinely, truly, and with every fiber of their being, believe that you are the problem, that your flaws, your actions, your very being are the sole source of their distress, their unhappiness, their righteous indignation. So why is this pervasive denial and relentless projection of the shadow the most dangerous sign, according to Jung? He argued with compelling clinical evidence that the greatest danger, the most pervasive and often unseen threat to individual and collective psychological well-being, comes not from those who are conscious of their own malice, their own destructive tendencies, and then choose to act upon them. Those people, however bad, however harmful, at least you often know where you stand. Their intentions, however malevolent, are often more transparent, more predictable. The real danger, the silent and insidious danger that can creep into your life unnoticed like a thief in the night, comes from those who are completely, utterly, and unshakably unconscious of their own darkness. Why is this so profoundly dangerous? Because first and foremost, they cannot change if they don't recognize the fundamental need for change within themselves. How can someone possibly alter a part of themselves, a dynamic within their own psyche that they don't even know exists, that they actively, forcefully deny? A person utterly unaware of their own deep-seated issues, their own destructive shadow dynamics, cannot possibly begin the arduous, often painful, yet ultimately liberating process of healing or personal transformation. They are trapped often for an entire lifetime in their comfortable, self-protective bubble of self-ignorance, and they will continue inevitably to repeat those same toxic, soul-crushing patterns, inflicting pain on themselves and more devastatingly on those around them again and again in relationship after relationship. The devastation caused by this profound unconsciousness is often silent and pervasive. This constant, unacknowledged projection of disowned negativity is like an invisible, odorless poison slowly, insidiously seeping into and poisoning the very atmosphere of relationships, work environments, and even entire family systems. It's not always loud, it's not always overtly dramatic or theatrical, but its destructive power, its subtle capacity to erode trust, to kill love, to undermine self-esteem, to foster confusion and despair is immense and far-reaching. And perhaps most frustratingly for those caught in its web, it's incredibly hard for outsiders to see, to recognize, to validate. This is the truly insidious and ghosting part of the dynamic. Outwardly, the person projecting their shadow can be incredibly charming, highly articulate, convincingly moralistic, even appear as a long-suffering, pitiable, and noble victim of circumstance or the cruelty of others. Their shadow is projected so skillfully, so subtly often, under the convincing guise of profound concern, unwavering righteousness, or heartbreaking vulnerability, that the person being affected, perhaps you right now, might be the only one who senses the deep, pervasive unease, the suffocating psychological pressure, the fundamental, undeniable wrongness of the situation. Meanwhile, others looking from the outside, from a safe distance, still see them as perfect, as admirable, as beyond reproach, perhaps even as the injured party. You can feel so utterly, terrifyingly alone in your own truth, your own painful lived reality, doubting your own perceptions, questioning your own sanity, because no one else seems to see what you see, to feel what you feel. And finally, you get dragged against your will, often without your conscious consent, into their psychological drama, a play not of your making, a script you never agreed to read, let alone perform. You unwittingly become a central actor, often unwittingly cast in the role of the antagonist, the villain, the source of all their problems, in an internal play they cannot or will not resolve within themselves. You try to fix the relationship. You try to understand them. You bend over backwards, contorting yourself into unrecognizable shapes to please them, to appease their inexplicable moods, to meet their ever-shifting, impossible demands. But in reality, you are wrestling with their shadow, their disowned demons, their unhealed wounds. A battle you can never ever win on their behalf. A battle that will only leave you exhausted, depleted, and further entangled in their unconscious web. What specific manifestations, then, these subtle yet potent indicators, do you need to stay alert for in your daily interactions, in your relationships, in the people you encounter? What are the telltale signs that someone might be unconsciously yet powerfully projecting their unacknowledged shadow onto you or onto others around them? Listen closely now, because recognizing these patterns, learning to see them for what they are, can be your first, most crucial line of defense. your first step towards reclaiming your own psychological space. Be particularly wary of those individuals who seem to possess a suspiciously, almost unnervingly flawless perfection. These are the people who seem to never make mistakes, who never show any discernible flaws, who never admit to weakness or doubt, and who always consistently present themselves to the world as unimpeachable moral role models, as paragons of unwavering virtue. The persistent, almost aggressive absence of normal human cracks, of genuine vulnerability, of humbly admitted error, can be a significant indicator of an overly rigid, brittle persona, a mask constructed with such desperate care that it serves only to conceal a very large, very dark, and very active, yet completely denied shadow. Notice if they consistently, almost reflexively, and often dramatically play the role of the victim, or conversely, the all-knowing, all-powerful hero, in every situation, in every narrative they construct about their lives. They are either the innocent party endlessly wronged by cruel circumstances, or the inherent malevolence of others, or they are the sole savior, the only one capable of fixing things, the one who bears all burdens with noble resignation. There is rarely, if ever, any genuine, nuanced self-reflection on their own role, their own contribution, their own agency in the problems, conflicts, or difficulties that arise. Do they overreact with extreme, often shocking and disproportionate harshness to what seem like minor flaws or unintentional mistakes in others? They might fly into a sudden terrifying rage, criticize mercilessly and with cutting precision, or show utter withering contempt for small errors, particularly if those errors, however insignificant, unwittingly touch upon sensitive, unacknowledged, and highly charged aspects of their own denied shadow. Observe their pervasive inability to genuinely, sincerely apologize or to humbly admit fault even when their culpability is glaringly obvious. When problems arise, when conflicts erupt, they will invariably find convoluted, often highly intellectualized ways to rationalize their actions, to justify their behavior, or to place the blame squarely and entirely on someone else's shoulders. An apology, if it ever materializes from their lips, is often superficial, insincere, a mere performance of contrition, or it is always tellingly accompanied by a but, a qualifier, an excuse, a justification that effectively negates any genuine admission of responsibility and subtly shifts the blame back onto you or the circumstances. Do they frequently engage in what feels like mind reading? Or do they consistently attribute negative, often malicious, and entirely unfounded motives to others, even in the complete absence of any concrete evidence? They seem to always know what others are thinking, what others are really feeling, and those thoughts and feelings are invariably critical, hostile, demeaning, or threatening towards them. This is a very clear, almost textbook and highly damaging form of projection, where their own suspicious, fearful, or aggressive inner world is painted onto the canvas of those around them. And most tellingly, perhaps the most reliable barometer of this dynamic, is how you consistently feel in their presence during and after your interactions. Do you frequently feel an inexplicable sense of guilt, a pervasive feeling of inadequacy, a gnawing shame, or a profound sense of being fundamentally wrong when you are around them? After conversations, after shared time, do you find yourself feeling like you're the one at fault? You're not good enough. You've somehow failed. You've done something terribly wrong, even if you can't logically pinpoint what it was or why you feel that way. This is a massive, glaring red flag, a critical signal that your emotional well-being, your sense of self, is being systematically compromised, undermined by their unconscious projections. Finally, note a pervasive, often heartbreaking lack of genuine, deep, and authentic empathy. While they might adeptly show concern, say all the right comforting words, perform all the expected gestures of sympathy, their empathy, upon closer examination, is often very shallow, performative, or only appears when it serves to enhance their own image as a good, caring, and or understanding person. They struggle often visibly to truly authentically put themselves in another's shoes to feel with another, especially if that person's struggles, vulnerabilities, or even their strengths inadvertently reflect or trigger aspects of their own denied, unacknowledged, and therefore threatening shadow. So how do you keep yourself safe from these dangerous signs? How do you protect your own precious soul, your own psychological integrity, your own inner light when faced with such unconscious, yet incredibly potent and often insidious negativity? Most importantly, and this cannot be stressed enough, this is the foundation upon which all other protective measures rest. Develop your own self-awareness. Begin the courageous, lifelong journey of exploring your own inner world, including bravely, honestly, and compassionately facing your own shadow. When you recognize your own wounds, your own triggers, your own imperfections, your own disowned aspects, your own capacity for darkness, you will be far less susceptible to becoming unconsciously entangled in the projections of others. You will develop a strong, reliable inner compass, a discerning faculty that helps you differentiate when your emotions are genuinely your emotions arising from your own experience, and when they are being induced, being tainted, being subtly manipulated, or being outright implanted by someone else's unconscious, undigested psychic material. Trust your intuition, that quiet, often dismissed, yet profoundly wise voice of your soul. If you feel deep in your gut that something is fundamentally off with a person, with a dynamic in a relationship, even if you can't articulate precisely why with cold, hard, rational logic, listen to that feeling. Your intuition, your unconscious perception often picks up on subtle unconscious signals, on energetic dissonances, on unspoken truths that your rational mind, with its incessant need for proof and tangible evidence, might entirely dismiss or rationalize away. Observe repetitive behavioral patterns. Don't just listen to their words, however convincing, however charming, however pitiful they may be. Words can lie, words can deceive, words can be a carefully constructed, highly polished facade designed to manage impressions. Watch their actions, and more importantly, watch for the recurring, often predictable and highly revealing patterns in their behavior over time. Pay particular attention to how they treat other people, not just you, especially when they are trying to impress you or get something from you, and how they consistently react under pressure when faced with legitimate criticism or when things simply don't go their way, when their control is challenged. Set clear and firm boundaries. This is not an act of aggression. It is an act of profound self-respect and essential self-preservation. Learn to say no, clearly, calmly, and without the need for excessive justification or apology. Learn to protect your emotional, mental, and even your physical space. You are not and can never be responsible for fixing or saving anyone, especially when they are completely unaware of or actively unwilling to acknowledge their own deep-seated issues, their own shadow material. Boundaries are not walls designed to keep others out in a hostile way. They are clear, respectful guidelines that teach others how to treat you, how to interact with you in a way that honors your well-being and your integrity. Limit interaction if necessary. Sometimes this is the most courageous, the most compassionate, and the most effective act of self-care you can undertake. If you find yourself consistently being pulled into vortexes of negativity, if you feel utterly drained, depleted both physically and mentally, if your sense of self feels eroded after being around a particular person, then consciously limiting your contact, or in some more extreme but equally valid cases, even severing the relationship entirely, might be absolutely necessary to protect your precious mental and emotional health, to reclaim your energy, your peace of mind, and crucially, with a deep breath of acceptance and a release of any savior complex you might harbor, understand that you must not try to change them, because you simply can't. You cannot force someone, you cannot coax someone, you cannot manipulate someone into confronting their shadow if they are not ready, if they are still vehemently, desperately, and unconsciously denying its very existence. Attempting to do so, however well-intentioned your efforts might be, usually only leads to more pain, more frustration, more entanglement for you, and a profound waste of your own valuable energy, your own precious light, your own limited time on this earth. Your primary responsibility, your sacred duty, is to your own growth, your own healing, your own journey towards wholeness. Recognizing this most dangerous sign, the pervasive unconscious denial and relentless damaging projection of the shadow, isn't about cultivating a cynical, mistrustful worldview or about living in a constant state of fear and suspicion of everyone around us. No, that would be a different kind of psychological prison, a self-imposed isolation. The purpose, the true gift of this profound Jungian insight is for us to become more discerning, more conscious, more awake to the invisible yet incredibly powerful and often life-altering psychological dynamics that can profoundly affect our lives, our relationships, our choices, and our overall well-being. The journey of self-discovery, the sacred path of individuation, as Carl Jung so eloquently and comprehensively described, it is at its core a courageous one. It requires the unwavering courage to face our whole selves, not just the parts we like, not just the socially acceptable, Instagram-worthy aspects, but all of it. The brilliant, radiant light and the deep, often uncomfortable and sometimes terrifying darkness. By undertaking this essential inner work, by daring to know ourselves in our fullness, we not only learn to protect ourselves more effectively from negative external influences, from the unconscious projections and manipulations of others, but more importantly, we become more whole, more resilient, more authentically ourselves, and ultimately more profoundly free from within. Stay alert. Not alert to the outside world with a heart hardened by suspicion and fear, ready to pounce on every perceived slight, but alert to the subtle, often whispered truth that resides within your own soul, and keenly, compassionately aware of the subtle, often unspoken, and frequently pain-filled signals that others may be unconsciously, unwittingly emitting from the depths of their own unhealed wounds. Because as Carl Jung so profoundly and unforgettably stated, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Understanding these deep psychological dynamics, both in ourselves and in others, is the very first, most crucial, and most empowering step for us to reclaim our power to consciously, intentionally create our own destiny, and for us to be truly, authentically, and joyfully free. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of this video, for taking this deep and perhaps at times uncomfortable dive with me into the complexities of the human psyche. If you found these insights helpful, if this message resonated with something deep inside you, if it sparked a moment of recognition or a desire for further exploration, and if you want to continue exploring the fascinating, transformative world of Jungian psychology and the ongoing, ever-unfolding journey of self-development, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and very importantly, ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos and discussions. And more importantly, if this message made you think of someone, a friend, a family member, a colleague who might need to hear it, who might be struggling with similar dynamics, please share this video with them. You never know whose life you might touch, whose burden you might lighten, whose path you might illuminate simply by sharing a piece of understanding. Let me know your thoughts, your experiences, your questions, your own insights in the comments section below. Have you ever encountered this dangerous sign, this shadow projection in someone? What was your experience like? How did you navigate it? Or how are you navigating it now? What helped you? What are you still struggling with? Every share, every comment, every voice is incredibly valuable to this community of seekers, this collective of souls striving for greater consciousness and wholeness. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay alert, stay conscious, stay compassionate, and always, always choose truth.